Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some soldering equipment. This one's mainly on my opinion of PACE, which is P-A-C-E, soldering, desoldering, basically any type of soldering process, their equipment. I've been using their stuff for years. It's one of those things pretty much since the first time I laid my hands on a piece of their equipment, I was sold for life. It's kind of like, I don't know what, there's very few other things I can think of that to use as a comparison. Maybe Snap-on and Mac tools. If you're a mechanic, which I used to be years ago. I was a diesel mechanic. I used to be a tractor trailer mechanic. Imagine that. I specialized in electronic diesel engines, but the first time I laid hands on Snap-on and Mac tools, again, I was sold for life. And, God, I used to spend eventually I had my own business doing mobile service, but, I was spending $50,000 to $100,000 a year on Snap-on and Mac trucks. But, it's one of those things, once you use the best, the rest just falls by the wayside. For the average user, the rest is usually fine. But when you use something on a daily basis, and in my case, most of the time, 7 days a week, type deal, your equipment's extremely important. You don't want it breaking down all the time, and you get what you pay for. And with soldering equipment, there's absolutely no better comparison, because the cheap stuff just doesn't hold up. Temperature's not accurate, limited features, complicated to use, or just, I guess you could say clunky to use. PACE is made in the USA, been around since, the beginning of soldering technology. They didn't invent the soldering iron, don't get me wrong, but when it came, they were the inventors of a lot of things. They've done a lot of pioneering work in the soldering industry. And they've kept up with, as technologies improve, they've kept up with it. So, as far as surface mount, they've got a lot of equipment for, modern BGA equipment. Now for me, I do a lot of through-hole components, but I also do surface mount. Now, this is basically an overview of this. I just got this, I bought it several days ago. It actually showed up today. The FedEx man dropped it off. This is probably the Cadillac. This is the, PRC. I think it's actually the 2000 model. But it's a multi-function, multi-process machine. And I got this for $100 plus shipping, which is dirt cheap when you consider, you're talking a couple $1,000 piece of equipment. And this thing is not light by any stretch of the imagination. Matter of fact, let me just look at the box and see what how much the box weighs. So give me just 1 second. Grab the box here. The shipping weight was 38 pounds. So, and I'll show you why this thing weighs so much. It's got a nice heavy aluminum housing. But aluminum's not going to make it heavy. What's inside is what makes it heavy. Now this is actually like most things, anytime I get something I like, I tend to hoard them, I guess you could say. Once I get something that I really like, I'll get all of them that I can. Now, I probably won't ever buy any more of these, because I think this might be my 6th one now. I mean, I used 2 of them, and had 3 spares, so now I've got a 4th, and yeah, I think I can probably call it quits on buying spares. The first one I ever got was brand new. Yeah, I had, it was the entire kit. God, I don't even remember how many thousands of dollars that was. It's been a long time ago, but man, it's one of those, it's a pocketbook herder. It'll put a pinch in your wallet, that's for sure. But like I say, you can pick this stuff up used. I think the big problem is a lot of people see this stuff for sale, and without a soldering iron or hot air tool or anything plugged in, that's what shows on the display, an error code. So if you ever see one of these for sale, now there's no saying that just because it's showing that means the unit's going to work fine, but I've never seen one of these broken. And man, one of these I have is a spare, man, that thing was used in industry, and I mean, it is beat to snot. There are bangs, and I mean, they even buckled the top. And this aluminum's not thin. They buckled the top a little bit, but tell you what, you turn that thing on, it still works just like the day it was made, like brand new. But I think that scares a lot of people away from a lot of Pace equipment. They'll see the base units for sale, and they see E, knowing E usually means error. Well, it does. The error is it doesn't sense, it's not sensing anything, because the Pace irons, desoldering, hot air, this is the thermojet, this is the hot air gun, they have temperature sensors in them. So without anything plugged in, it thinks there's an error. So you can see as soon as I plug it in, boink, temperature starts to rise. Now this is a 3-channel machine, so you can have 3 things hooked up at one time, and on this unit you can use all 3 of them at the same time. So you can have the thermojet, which is this handpiece, and I just hooked this one up just to test it when I unboxed it to see if it works, and it does. You could have a desoldering iron and a soldering iron hooked up. But this also has outlets for paste dispenser, so if you're doing soldering paste, let me grab one. Reach up here and grab it. So you can use, soldering paste dispensers. Has a pick vac, so let me grab one of my pick vacs. You can hook up the little pick vacs for picking up. I got a whole assortment of little suction cups, and it just hooks it up to a very small vacuum. And then that's actually the control. You just stick your finger over it, and when you put your finger over it, you can pick up a part. You lay a little surface mount part down on the board, and you let your finger up, and it drops it. There's the micro sheen, which is kind of like a Dremel tool, but it's a slow speed machine. You might have seen that in a few videos before. There's pulse plate for doing gold plating, silver plating. You can do, and actually, honestly, you can use this because it's just a DC power supply, but it's pulsed. That's why they call it pulse plate. If you get the chemicals, you could do chrome plating with this. I mean, you can do any type of plating. It's just, this specifically, they put this on here for doing gold plating, the fingers on, edge connectors on circuit boards. And there's the pulse heat, and there's a whole assortment of stuff you can hook up to the pulse heat. And this one is AC, but it's also pulsed. There's all kinds of little lap flow tools and all types of other little hand tools to hook up. They just use a gigantic RCA. Matter of fact, let me reach down here and grab the cord off of one of my normal daily drivers. Just takes this big cord, got speed terminals on one end, and then these just plug in to the other end. And then these are actuated. That's another thing. You see foot pedal switch here, so you can hook up the foot pedal to. Actually, that's because that was on continuous. Oh, I had to build up air pressure. There's the pick vac. But there's foot pedal on the back. You can hook up foot pedal. Actually, you can also hook up foot pedals for all 3 of these channels if you so choose. You don't need to. But it's just, man, it does so much. You can set tip offset. So when you're using like the thermo pick or the thermo tweeze, and you know what temperature you want the tip of your iron or your pickup tool and whatnot, you look it up in the pace chart. You'll look up the tip offset temperature. So you might be 30 or 40 degrees. So that means that it might be if y'all were to stick a big honking tip in this thing, yeah, it might be 380 degrees Celsius right here. But by the time you get out to a big quad flat pack pickup tool out here on the end, it might have dropped 40 degrees. Well, that's what the tip, Pace has already calculated that on all of their tips. And you just look it up in the tip chart, look up the offset temperature, and you can program that in, and then that makes sure that the temperature out at the soldering end is the actual temperature you want. Like I said, it's just so feature-packed, does so many things. Pressure and vacuum for, like I say, this is a hot air tool, the thermojet. And when you set these up, you're supposed to, basically set them up until you can basically, slightly burn a line in a, little chem wipe here. So let me pause the video here, and I actually want to pull this apart. I want to give you a good idea of what comes with that extra money you're paying. You know, I paid all this money for something like this, what the hell am I going to get? Well, like I say, it's heavy as a tank. Well, it's heavy as a tank for a reason. You'll see once I get the cover, or, well, it's not a cover. Yeah, once you pull the chassis out, you'll see why they cost so much. And one thing that makes these really nice is very simple to service. They actually had their thinking cap on when it came time to designing this. You can see they used a extruded aluminum housing that has T-tracks in it. So there's 4, actually they're right here. I just took them out, nuts and bolts that fit down into, you see there's a little slot there, and it fits into a T-track in the bottom case, comes up through that slot, and then locks in the chassis. So you take, all the screws out around the outside perimeter, then on the back side to release the back panel. You don't have to remove the back panel because there's only 3 screws. There's like one here, here, and here across the back that attach the back panel on the inside to the actual piece of metal on the outside. And then you can just slide the entire chassis out for service. So let me pause it and get it out and get the housing out of the way. Okay, so here it is out of the chassis now, and you can see it's very easy to, like I say, once you slide it out, it's easy to get in. Just a couple screws, 4 on each board if you needed to pull that board up. Very well built, made in the USA, and good old USA quality. They build stuff now just like they built back in the 70s. Very, very well built, and very, very heavy. And it's very heavy because it has some pretty good sized transformers in there. You can see how big the core is on that thing. And unlike a lot of machines that share pumps and vacuum ports and whatnot and use a clunky solenoid system, they actually have a couple different units inside this. Of course, that adds to the weight and the expense of the units as well. So you saw one over there. There's another one here. Nice big capacitors down in there. This is a piece of industrial machinery. This was not designed for the average homeowner, and actually it wasn't designed for the, honestly, for the average repair shop to use. Circuit boards are very well laid out. They're good quality, circuit boards. They didn't, cheap out on stuff like that. You can see they even have, everything's tied down really nice, just really, really well made. And there is, like I say, there's a lot to these things. I mean, considering all you're doing is soldering, desoldering, these are actually very complicated little machines. Even has a little reservoir there. Actually, that's what that little, get the camera down here. It's kind of back in the shadows there, but there's a little vacuum reservoir there. Like I say, they just extremely well thought out pieces of equipment. I mean, you can see that for RF protection, whatnot, they've got, beads on stuff. The bigger, actually, I wouldn't call that a bead. That's a big core around those wires. Just really, really well laid out. You can't beat it. So, like I say, if you ever see one of these for sale, I mean, like I say, I know a lot of people, they buy the smaller PACE units, and I see those things go for more than these units. Hey, people, if you can pick up one of these, the big PRC2000 units for half, a third, a quarter or a tenth of the price of one of those smaller units, you can't go wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's like I say, 3-channel, because your normal base units, they don't have any of this. That's all you're looking at. That's basically most of your other units. That's what they have. 3-channel. Well, I mean, you can get to 1 channels, but it's 3 channels. Has the snapback and pressure ports for either hot air reflow work or for desoldering equipment, and that's it. For less money, a lot of times you can pick these units up and they have all of these additional features. And these are nice because then you can use, like with these, you can use the some of the conduct tweeze tools, like I say, plating, the micro sheen. I've really come to love that little guy because it's low speed and operated by a foot control. So, I can turn that on and off with the foot switch. The paste dispenser, if you do a lot of, surface mount work, it's great to be able to use the paste dispenser. That makes dispensing paste solders so much more accurate. You can put down precise little dots. You can do it timed or continuous with foot, so if you set it for timed, every time you hit the foot pedal, the vacuum pump or the pressure pump will come on for a specific amount of time, so it dispenses the exact same amount of solder paste every single time you push the foot switch. The pick vac's really handy for picking up, components, quad flat packs, and just all kinds of, surface mount stuff that is hard to pick up nowadays. You can just use that little guy. So, keep an eye out. You ever see one of these? They're well worth the money. Used, doesn't matter. I mean, like I said, I've got one that looks like it's been through the ringer, and man, it works like the day it was made. I just cannot say enough about their equipment, how well built it is. I mean, I have one of their old units, really, really old. The desoldering iron was just had a 120 volt plug on the end. Even back in the 70s, I mean, hell, I used that thing for a long, and that's actually the first piece of equipment I ever had from Pace, was that really old antique Pace desoldering. Well, it's soldering and desoldering because they had the soldering iron for it too. But like I say, it was 120 volt. They weren't using the low voltage, wasn't digital controlled. They did have a big inside. It was a huge potentiometer inside, several watt, in line with the desoldering iron jack. But like I say, I used that thing for years and it worked great. But of course they've greatly improved their equipment. The new tips. That's one of the nice things. The tips on like their desoldering equipment now. These things, man, and the old ones, especially considering the type of stuff I desolder a lot, I end up with a lot of old nasty fluxes, and the desoldering tips were basically just a copper tube with a precise size hole in the middle of them. But I used to actually wear those out rather frequently. Sometimes once a week I'd need a new tip. Now granted, those didn't cost much because that's basically all they were, was a piece of copper with a hole bored through the middle. But because the flux would actually eat them out from the inside. The new tips, for the newer machines, there a lot more design goes into them. They've got these little tubes that go back into the back of the handle piece, so very, very rarely do you get any type of plugs in the desoldering tips anymore. And even if you do, it's not hard. I just piece of wire, pop them out. But like I say, pretty much clogs are a thing of the past nowadays. With their newer tips, and they have such a large variety. That's the other thing with Pace. When it comes to soldering iron tips and desoldering tips, I mean, you can go anything from little, teeny, actually that's not the smallest I have even smaller than that, but, up to, some of my, like, normal daily drivers. There's the mini wave, which is great for doing surface mount stuff. I know that's not surface mount, but if they were surface mount pins, this actually has a little cup in the end of that tip. It's a little reservoir. You put basically a ball of solder on there, and you can just flow that across all those pins and just solder. That's how you would do it. Just comes straight across. Works just fantastic. I mean, big tips. There, I'm gonna reach over here in one of my other trays and grab some of the other ones. There's actually these are nice, the knife edge styles. Those are actually good for doing surface mount soldering too. You just put a well of solder on there and you can just go right across the tips. A lot of times you can do an entire quad flat pack with just preload the tip, and you can solder all four sides of the quad flat pack with one of those. The pointy tips. There's just dozens and dozens. And the same thing with the desoldering tips. There's different sizes. There's ones with for limited access. They're smaller in diameter. There's ones that have really big tips. There's the flow desolders for desoldering multiple pads. Once you remove like a quad flat pack, you need to clean all that solder residue off all of the pads so you can install your new part. You can go over it, just suck it off all the pads, and just split second, and it's done. But there you go. There's the I guess you could call it a teardown. I don't know what day of the week this video will get uploaded, but we'll call this teardown something day of the week of the Pace PRC2000, process control system. And, my thoughts on it, like I say, greatest invention since, I don't know, sliced bread isn't that amazing, but, it's the greatest invention since something. Probably my favorite piece of equipment. And honestly, next to, I don't know, maybe an oscilloscope, a multimeter, and my communications test set, this is, the fourth most, well, it's not the fourth most used, but it's, if I had the top 4 things that I use the most as far as a big expensive equipment goes, you're going to have your meter, your scope, communications test set, and this. This is in the top 4 of the most used equipment, because you got to remember, if you're using test equipment, you're using it to diagnose something, and when you diagnose something's bad, you got to desolder it and solder the new one back in. So, like I say, this thing they get the snot used out of them. I mean, just fantastic piece of equipment. Oh, and there are other features you can get in here. There's actually a bunch of menus you can get into. You can set up security codes. You can set maximum temperature, operating temperatures, auto shutdown timers. So if you were to accidentally leave it on and leave the room and forget about it, it will automatically power. It powers back the soldering irons. So great for helping to prevent don't want to burn your shop down. But man, I'm so happy to get another one. $100 too. I think that's the cheapest I've ever paid, honestly, for a 2000 system. Hell, any one of the pumps or any of the major components in there going to cost a hell of a lot more than that to buy from Pace. And they still make this exact unit. No difference. They still make this to this day. So, hell, if I ever needed a board or, like I say, one of the pumps or a transformer, God forbid anything would ever happen, which, they never seem to break, but if anything ever did, hell, what I paid for this unit was worth it just to get one spare part out of it. So there you go, my thoughts on the Pace equipment.